So prynhawn da, good afternoon. We've got a small audience today, but I've had apologies from various colleagues who are looking forward to watching the recording. I know it's always busy on a Wednesday, but there is no better time during the week. Our patch seminars are normally held on the third Wednesday of every month. But I apologize, there won't be a November seminar. So this is the only seminar in the series for this term. We will resume in February. And if colleagues would like to offer a talk, get in touch with me. It's the same if they'd like to nominate someone. If there's an open invitation for anyone to offer a talk. We record seminars, and the link to the recording is shared when I send out the email after the talk, and the recordings are made available via the Wizard website, and there's a Patch YouTube channel too by now. I will include the link there. And today will be, sorry, my screen has frozen. There we go. Today we'll be listening to Dr. Jennifer Rudd, Senior Lecturer in Climate Education at Swansea University's School of Management. The title of her talk today is How Could Wales Reach Net Zero Carbon by 2035? Jennifer has a decade of experience working in chemistry and the technical circular economy, developing next generation solar panels and working on hydrogen generation and carbon capture. Using this knowledge, she developed the UNCO2 program in 2018, seeking to teach young people about climate mitigation. Since then, she has worked on a number of climate change education programs across disciplines, age ranges, and countries. She has helped train teachers in Nigeria, co-created a program for Welsh primary school pupils to learn about fast fashion, co-developed a new scale for measuring climate capability, and consulted for a range of third sector and educational institutions on climate change education programs. She has communicated the climate emergency through national talks, radio, and printed media. She was nominated for 2 Swansea University Awards in 2020 and is regularly invited to give talks on climate change mitigation and climate change education. As you'll have read in the promotional email for today, Jennifer is a member of the Net Zero by 2035 Commission, which advises Welsh Government on pathways to net zero, and she has been invited to present her work in the Senedd and at trade events in London. It's a pleasure to have her today at the Patch Seminar. Diolch yn fawr, Jennifer, and we look forward to your presentation.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Okay. So we'll do the standard. Can you all see my screen? Okay.
I can't see it yet. Oh, there you go.
Yep, got it. Brilliant. Okay. Right, I will apologise for the formatting. So the first, I think, 5 or 6 slides after the overview are kind of standard net zero 2035 slides, and I was not involved in creating them. And then I kind of patched in a talk that I gave to the British Educational Research Association, and formatting's never my strong point anyway. Hopefully the content will be interesting, so we don't need to worry about how ugly the slides are. So to give you an overview of the talk, there we go. So I'll give you a background to the formation and the ethos of the Wales Net Zero 2035 Challenge Group. I will read out an initial vision, give you a summary of the findings for the food, buildings, energy, transport and connectivity part groups, which will make more sense once we've done the background. Give you a deeper dive into the methodology and pathways for education, jobs and work, which was one that I co-chaired. Give you a final vision and then talk about what we're hoping to happen next and wrap up. So, in the cooperation agreement of 2021 between the Welsh Government and Plaid Cymru, they decided to commission independent advice to examine potential pathways to net zero by 2035. So that brings forward the current target date is 2050, so they were looking at 15 years early. They were interested in the impact on society, sectors of the economy, how we could mitigate costs, and how we can make sure that the costs and benefits are shared fairly. So Jane Davidson was put in charge of the group, and she then went out and recruited 20 or 25 individuals from the public sector, the private sector, third sector, universities, to independently look at how we could maybe get Wales to net zero by 2035. So we had a backbone of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. And so we wanted our pathways to be compatible with the ambitions of the goals and the ways of working for the Future Generations Act. When we initially got together, we kind of went, oh my gosh, this is huge. How on earth do we do this? And so we organised the big challenge into 5 smaller challenges. So how could Wales feed itself by 2035? How could Wales meet energy needs by 2035 whilst phasing out fossil fuels? How could Wales heat and build homes and workplaces by 2035? How could people and places be connected across Wales by 2035? And then what could education, jobs and work look like across Wales by 2035? But of course, throughout all of those, there are other things like circular economy, psychology and behaviour, future-proofing, the need for just transition, the need for money, the need for legal involvement. And so we also established a 6th group, which was initially called Domains, and in the actual reports is called Enablers. And so the idea of domains was that they would explore the cross-cutting themes which needed to be considered as part of every challenge. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just 20-odd people sat in a room kind of thinking and coming up with something. We wanted to make sure that we got as much involvement from Wales and the wider world as possible. So we consulted with the Wales Youth Parliament. We made sure that we had partner organisations to test and socialise our conclusions. We had open calls for evidence for each challenge, and they went out at different points during last year. And then, of course, we contacted relevant stakeholders and the public through the work of our challenge groups. So each challenge group, a challenge group is a group looking at one of these particular questions. So each challenge group decided themselves how they were going to work. So some challenge groups had a core group from the Wales Net Zero challenge group, and then they were also inviting people in as well to sit on that challenge group. I know the food group went to a lot of different farming and agricultural shows, because what they wanted to do was capture as many different viewpoints from the farming community as possible. And I'll go into a bit more detail of what my group did in a bit. So that gave us our framework. So we had the idea of getting to net zero. We had our different topics that we were working on. We knew that we needed participation and engagement from Wales, the public, the people in stakeholders. We had our cross-cutting group. We needed to take into account the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act. And then, of course, there are the planetary boundaries that we need to recognise as limits. So the next slide is not a slide for you to read. It's just there for me to read out. So I almost want you to close your eyes as I read this and just kind of picture a different Wales. So one of the, I think even before we had the different challenge groups, as the Wales Net Zero group as a whole, we had some time to think about and write down a vision of what Wales could look like in 2035. So I'm going to read you my one. So Sam is heading out to work. He retrained in 2025 through a government-funded programme, helping people in high-carbon jobs transition to low-carbon jobs. Sam is still a qualified gas-safe plumber, but he's also highly skilled in fitting heat pumps into houses across Wales. Sam's husband Gethin works in the new heat pump manufacturing plant on the old Rolls-Royce site in mid-Wales. With increased awareness around flying affecting the planet and a growing pressure to stop business as usual, the aviation manufacture industry wound down in Wales. However, as demand for heat pumps and warmer homes increased, the site was reused and the workers, including Gethin, were retrained. The 4-day week, implemented in the 2020s, means that Sam and Gethin have time to explore their local area, hiking and cycling, and turn their backyard into a little allotment to grow their own food and wildflowers. Down the road, Sally owns a small holding with a few sheep and chickens. Sam can purchase eggs from Sally whenever he likes, and the wool from her sheep now lines the cavity walls in his house. A local cooperative formed between local insulation manufacturers, sheep farmers and builders, and research was put into developing good quality, long-lasting wool-based insulation. Now it's being rolled out across the country. The community centre is the hub of the town. After the COVID pandemic, people started to realise how important community was. At the hub, surplus food is distributed to anyone who would like it. Excess clothes and toys are available to all, helping new parents get started and providing a meeting place to help abate isolation. The elderly give regular talks on how to make clothes, can food, and create woolen goods, using wool from Sally's sheep, of course. The community hub has solar panels on the roof and a heat pump installed by Sam. There's a backup generator in case of power outages and an electric car out front. The car can be signed out by members of the community in case they need to pick up something large or travel far. It's used regularly by a wide range of people. For day-to-day things, most people use the bus service, which is much improved since the Welsh Government moved funding from building new roads into public transport. The community hub also offers taster days for people wanting to try cycling, with a range of electric bikes, mountain bikes, and attachments to add children on, such as bike seats and tagalongs. There's an active swap shop happening through the families in the town as well. As children go, their old helmets, seats, etc. get passed back to the community hub to go to those who need them. There's even talk of holding a mini Eisteddfod next year. With the instigation of the 4-day week, people are finding more time and inclination to delve deeper into Wales's culture. Welsh lessons have been fully subscribed in the town, and theatre groups and music troupes are regular after-school and weekend activities for any age. It's really funny looking back at that because I can see the kind of bits of my research experience that have really played into where I was thinking in 2022. So I actually know an amazing community hub, exactly like the one I've described. And I was involved in a research project around how we could make wool-based insulation. So if you think about the Wales Net Zero group, obviously there were 20 odd people. We all had our individual visions of what a net zero 2035 Wales could look like. And that just kind of gives you a flavour of how, different aspects of our lives shape, what we come up with. And obviously also why it's so important to have wider participation when we're creating plans for 2035. It brings out bias anyway. So moving on to the kind of the real life reports. So on the 16th of September, there were 7 reports published by the Wales Net Zero 2035 Challenge Group. There was an overview and a summary of the findings from Jane Davidson and Stan Townsend, who was the secretariat for the group. There were the 5 challenge group reports. And there was also one from, what is historically been called domains and is now called enablers. And the reports are really meaty. They have been presented in a really nice way that does make them accessible and easy to read. It's not something that you can go into detail for every single topic in an hour. So I haven't tried. But I do encourage you to go and have a look at them. But a summary of Jane's summary is that achieving net zero by 2035 will require a significant step change in ambition from the Welsh Government support from the UK government, and a greater societal mandate for change. I don't think there's any big surprise there. Huge benefits to the Welsh Republic are possible through a net zero transition, including improved public health, reduced pressure on our NHS, greater energy security, more resilient food supply, and low carbon job generation. Urgent action is needed now to ensure Wales captures the value and benefits of a net zero transition over the long term, whilst also limiting exposure to climate-related risks and greater costs in dealing with the consequences of inaction. And again, and this isn't to denigrate Jane at all, but a lot of the work that we were doing, I was kind of, especially with the education one, I was reading reports that other people had published and going, well, we're just saying the same thing over and over again until government gets a handle on the fact that, you know, action on climate change is a no-brainer. You fix, you know, you fix all of the contributing factors to climate change and you end up with better air, better health, you know, decreased pressure on the NHS, lower risk of blackouts, happier, warmer, healthier people. And it's kind of frustrating in a way. So each report contains, so what we had to do was create pathways that Welsh Government could then follow to get to net zero by 2035 and identify the key actions within those pathways that we needed to take. So if we think about how could Wales feed itself by 2035, the headlines were, we need to secure a just transition for farmers and growers with long-term financial support and extended tenancy agreements. We need to prioritise locally, sustainably produced food through public procurement to develop local markets and distribution chains. We need to implement a land and marine use framework and national food strategy, reduce the dominance of livestock production, and incentivise growing a wider range of sustainable crops to replace imports. And then I've highlighted the last bullet point in orange, in purple, sorry. So each report got a different colour. So the food group was green and the education group was purple. So it's highlighted in purple because it overlaps with the education report. So they were very keen that food literacy should be enhanced within the education system. So this is you know, helping people understand the benefits of healthy eating, of eating seasonably, eating locally produced food, and understanding the impact of what we eat. For how could Wales meet energy needs by 2035 whilst phasing out fossil fuels? There were two kind of big topics that I've highlighted in bold, and the secretariat for that challenge group used the phrase unleashing the power of communities, which I just thought was so inspiring and so exciting. And so to be able to do that, we need to increase planning capacity and streamlining the consenting process to speed up the deployment of renewable energy, but also get a baseline for community benefit funds to ensure that communities benefit from renewable energy projects. And I think the other thing that hasn't made the overall summary, but will be in the energy group's report, is the fact that you also then need to kind of empower communities to be able to set up their own community-based renewable projects. So there are some communities within Wales who've managed to do this. If they could then write a blueprint or a how-to manual for other communities, people might realise that they're able to do it as well. And it's having that conversation to help people understand that, okay, well, they might do you know, finance in a bank for Barclays or something, but that also means that they could be part of a community group and do the finance to support a renewable energy project. And you might have somebody who is a solicitor doing wills, but that means that they are already legally minded, so they could come in and they could help with the legal bits for the community benefit fund, for a well, for the community benefit funds, but also then understanding all of the government red tape for setting up a renewable energy project. So how do we empower communities and unleash the power of communities? And that I really wanted to highlight because it was one of those goosebump moments in the group's work. Also need to urge National Grid and the UK government to accelerate UK-wide electricity transmission system initiatives and choreograph industrial decarbonisation through regional economy bodies to deliver better outcomes and realise supply chain opportunities. So how could Wales heat and build homes and workplaces by 2035? So one of the people in this group was called Andy Reagan, and he works for Nesta. I looked for a copy of his scary graph that he used to bring out for meetings, but I couldn't find it. So the key thing here was prioritise the installation of heat pumps in private homes, upgrading building fabric where necessary to avoid increased bills, and then fund insulation for fuel poor homes, installing heat pumps wherever possible. And he had this graph, and it basically went, this is what heat pump installation is doing at the moment. And it was like something really low on the y-axis. He was like, this is what we actually need to see if we're going to have a transition to electricity-based heating. So that rollout, and Nesta has done an extensive amount of work on this. And you'll note the lack of hydrogen mentioned on this slide. So I don't think there was anyone at all on the Wales Net Zero group who thought that hydrogen was a feasible heating solution for domestic homes. They also advocate launching a low interest green loan for homeowners, which brings in private finance, develops supply chains and creates new jobs. Obviously at the moment, well, kind of pre-Octopus, heat pumps were really expensive, and people don't have that amount of capital. So when we put a heat pump in our house, we had to pay up front, and then Welsh Government is giving us some money back on that every quarter for 7 years. So we had to give out that upfront investment, knowing that we would get that money back in over a very slow period of time. And we wouldn't get all of it back. And they don't pay interest either. So whereas if you think about Octopus, which is a major energy supplier in the UK, they are now offering heat pump installation. So my dad recently had one installed in his house, which is a 4-bedroom detached in the north of England, and I think he's paid about £3,000, which is just incredible. And that was the heat pump, the installation. Octopus took away his old gas boiler, everything. And once we get heat pumps kind of comparable with a new boiler, then it is possible for private homeowners to go out and purchase one. Now, of course, for that, we need to, and again, you'll see the purple highlight where it overlaps with the Education, Work and Skills group, to support existing tradespeople to join the heat and retrofit workforce in the short term, and then work with colleges to develop training for young people. At the moment, if we keep training up people for employment in gas adjacent industries such as servicing gas boilers, we are setting them up to be out of employment in the future. And one thing that was really, really important for the Wales Net Zero group was that idea of a just transition. Latterly, Jane said she was getting a lot of people going, oh, you must be absolutely delighted about Port Talbot shutting down because it makes your work even easier because we drop so many emissions. But actually, all of us are devastated that there are so many thousands of people out of work and the knock-on impact of that. And what we really wanted to achieve with this report was to say, we need to future-proof employment. We need to future-proof opportunities. We need to be thinking about what are the next opportunities right now so that we're training people into those roles. And then what we really need to do is think about how do we transition people out of high carbon employment into low carbon employment before the high carbon employment completely disappears. I say a lot, sorry about that if it bothers anyone. So how could people and places be connected across Wales by 2035? So this group split their suggestions into 3 different areas. So travel less, travel differently, and travel better. So first off, it was boosting digital connectivity. So this started as a travel group, and then it became more important that we had connections within that. So it wasn't just about how do we travel, it was about how do we stay connected to people. So digital connectivity was really important. So communities can use broadband. People should love local by supporting shops and services to make it easier for people to work, shop and play without having to drive. Make sure that there's repair, refill and reuse schemes, and that we curb advertising. Now, I thought this was really a really interesting statement in a group that was looking at how we can be more connected. And one of the things that they realized was, more advertising means that we want more stuff. If we want more stuff, we're going to buy more stuff. If we buy more stuff, we've got to move more stuff. We've either got to move us to the stuff or the stuff to us. And so in this group, curbing advertising to minimize the movement of goods was important. Travel differently. Invest in fairer fares for public transport and free bus travel for all under 22s and disadvantaged groups. Activate active travel, so financially disincentivize driving and make walking and cycling more fun and convenient and make it look like the more cost-effective approach. And then decarbonize the commute by partnering with big employers to incentivize cycling, walking and public transport. And then so those first 2 sectors have dealt with, we now have a lot less unnecessary travel. So what about the point where we actually really have to travel? So we could establish electric hubs by working with car-dependent rural and urban communities to offer affordable and convenient access to electric vehicles. We can incentivize rail freight over road haulage and deliver to parcel consolidation centres using small electric vans and cargo bikes for last mile deliveries. And then we can position Wales as a sustainable aviation fuel leader by establishing a centre of excellence at Cardiff Airport and a production plant at Port Talbot. I've put that in bold because I really don't like it. But I thought that was, I'm hoping that the value add of having me to give this talk rather than just sending you all off to spend an hour reading the reports is the fact that you get my personal commentary on what we've been doing, why we've been doing it, that kind of inside view on the Wales Net Zero group. This is one of the examples where we might have had differing opinions in the group as a whole, but we all had to come together and agree with these reports going out. And it was Lorraine Whitmarsh and Ergine Powell who were leading the people and places being connected, and I trust them. And if this is the best solution that they felt that they could come up with all of their listening that they were doing, then that's what it is. And it does provide an opportunity. I would like to think that I could fly in the future. Yeah. So we'll get slightly onto maybe a bit less umming as I move on to the challenge group that I co-chaired with Ben Rollins at Black Mountains College, and we were supported by Sarah Clayton, who was our secretariat. Never understood the 2 different words. So we were thinking about what could education, jobs and work look like across Wales by 2035. So as Geraldine introduced, my area of interest particularly is climate change education in primary and secondary schools. Ben works at college level with Black Mountains College, and they're also now running degree programs as well. So he was very much thinking about further and higher education, and I was thinking about primary and secondary. And so there are a number of resources that I held quite tight to. So a British Council report, 2 UNESCO reports, and then the Wales Centre for Public Policy also wrote a background paper for us, which you can see on their website as well. So we had 8 written submissions through the call for evidence, and then we did online interviews with 40 organisations and individuals. So we started by identifying individuals and organisations that we wanted to speak to, that we particularly wanted to speak to. And then obviously that led to further recommendations of people to speak to. And we didn't limit our interviews to people living in Wales or working for Welsh organisations. So we got perspectives from England as well. And I think we could have pushed harder potentially to get, you know, perspectives from Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. We were a bit time limited on this by the fact that we were doing this in addition to our normal jobs. So we did thematic analysis of the interviews and the written submissions, and that led to the development of pathways. So the pathways were then split into the immediate term. So what did we need to do right now? The near term, so 2027 to 2030, and then the longer term of 2030 to 2035. The most detailed pathways, because I was doing it and I'm autistic, so I like to get really deep into detail, were for the primary and secondary education, and then the pathways beyond are much broader, but they're much more ambitious. And these draw on the political landscape in Wales, but they could also be transferred to other geographical areas. So for primary and secondary education, there were some key things that we thought needed to be done. So the first, I'll skip the first one because it involves a bit more explanation. I'll come back to it. So commission a survey on teacher confidence to teach climate change and sustainability education and ascertain teacher training requirements by 2026. So this was something, there's a bit of work that's been done in England about English teachers' competencies to teach climate change. The English context is different because they don't explicitly have climate change and sustainability built into their curriculum, which the new curriculum for Wales does. And also you can't just assume, you know, teachers in Wales, if you talk to people like the Royal Society of Chemistry, teaching in Wales are just a bit different to the teachers in England. And that might just be, you know, Welsh context, the fact that we're living more rurally. I don't know what it is, but you can't extrapolate from surveys on teachers in England to teachers in Wales. So I think a survey to figure out what is going on, you know, what people feel able to do is really important as a baseline. We then need to provide support for teachers to be able to teach climate change and sustainability education. So that involves creating a range of experts from academia, from teaching, the third sector, who can then deliver training, CPD, and support teachers in curriculum development. We need a place where we can store really good resources, and we need to make sure that that's maintained and then promoted to teachers. And it would be good to get Eston involved in this as well. So whilst they can't, I think it would spread them quite thin to add on, you know, extra specific boxes for them to tick as they go through their reports. I think a general assessment of sustainability throughout the areas of learning experience would be good. And then obviously working with exam boards to make sure that we're integrating climate change sustainability education into exam specifications across the learning and across the areas of learning and experience. So it's not enough to just put this into geography and put this into science. We want to see this across the curriculum and try and make sure that people are getting the opportunity to have project-based learning and practical action-oriented experiences. The time disappeared so quickly. Last time I looked at the clock, it was 15 minutes ago. Sorry about that. If you look at the pedagogical literature around teaching climate change sustainability education, it's really important for kids to have hand-on experiences, to be involved in group work, and to have hope and the ability to explore their emotions as well in this sort of education. So if we just teach it as fact-based, it's not going to be deep in their hearts. we're not going to have a long-lasting impact. We need ways for them to understand that they can act on climate change, that, you know, everybody can be brought into climate action. And then the climate action groups, I think, is also really important in Wales as well, because this is something that is currently being done in Carmarthenshire. So there is an amazing woman called Louise Morgan who works for Carmarthenshire Council, and she established what she's calling a climate action group. And so this is representatives from all of the eco councils at schools in Carmarthenshire that come together once a term, and they have their own manifesto, and they talk about, they share kind of climate change lessons that they've had, they share challenges that they're having. So for example, the new recycling legislation came in just before the last summer meeting that they had, and you could hear the students, particularly from the secondary schools, saying, oh, well, I'd like to raise a point because we've implemented the recycling system. However, in our canteens, we're seeing this behaviour from the students, and we've tried this to mitigate that. And then another eco council rep from a secondary school went, oh, now we've tried this approach. And so they, you know, it was peer-to-peer sharing, but they were then going to go back into their schools and implement those changes. It wasn't a teacher-led approach. This was very much the students are leading the approaches. And there's some really incredible work coming out of those climate action groups. And of course, then the teachers feel supported because they know that they have other teachers in other schools who are trying to do the same thing. They can share resources, they can share experiences. They're not on their own. Whereas teachers in schools can feel quite isolated if they're the gung-ho climate change oriented teacher, but they're the only one in their school. They can feel really isolated and quite disheartened, whereas these teachers have the opportunity to get together with each other, and they might be the only one in their school, but they know that they're not the only one in their county, and that together they can do some really cool things. And that's led to the students being invited into the Senedd to have a particular day on climate change where they sit in one of the Senedd chambers, and all sorts of different things. I will breeze through the last few so that we can stop in time for questions. So for further education, something similar to the climate change experts that we're suggesting for primary and secondary schools, that we have a just transition advisory group set up, and then they should review and reaccredit existing further education courses in consultation with the industry and regional learning and skills partnerships. And then also the Commission for Tertiary Education and Research must mandate the inclusion of climate literacy in basic skills and in the Wales Essential Skills Toolkit for all learners post-16. In higher education, we want to encourage all universities to introduce a module on climate change sustainability education for all incoming students by 2027. And I think this might be supported by the recent advice from the QAA, which says that we need to be incorporating more sustainability into our higher education courses for them to be accredited. It is absolutely desperate that we integrate climate change sustainability education into initial teacher education. It is not currently there, and this is a massive hole. How are teachers supposed to teach the sustainability aspect of the new curriculum of Wales if they're not being taught how to do it when they're training to be a teacher? And then also through the CTR, we'd like to mandate that universities utilise the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act as a framework to assess and scrutinise research proposals and research design. For people out of the education system in the wider world, we'd like to cost and pilot a national green skilling wage by 2027. So this would give people a basic income as well as paying their tuition fees if they want to retrain from a high carbon to a low carbon job. And then, of course, we'd like to see that rolled out. We need to develop a pipeline of training and employment to develop a workforce for the just and nature positive transition. So that means that relationships between Welsh Government, low carbon businesses and further education providers we've seen this happening in the West Midlands as a really nice kind of case study. Look in the report, please. We'd like to develop a recognised CPD pathway for people already in employment so that they can learn about climate change, learn about, you know, and other parts of nature as well. And then mandate that as a training requirement for key services in the public sector, and then encourage businesses to adopt that as well. We need to improve the equality and diversity of applicants for low carbon jobs and upskilling, and develop case studies, including role models from the Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities to showcase how sustainability can benefit those communities and inspire future generations to participate in the transition to a low carbon Wales. And I'm really grateful to East, so the Ethnic Minorities and Youth Support Team, for all of the employees in their organisation contributed to this report. And then I think what's really important is we need to ensure parity of academic and vocational routes into employment, and make sure that we've got more alternative entry points into employment for people that struggle with formal education pathways. Not every, you know, a lot of the jobs that are coming in the future don't necessarily need a degree. We need people to realise that it's okay. We need to take away the stigma of going into an apprenticeship. You know, people are equally intelligent and the jobs are equally important. It doesn't matter whether you go to higher education or you do an apprenticeship. If you are part of the just transition, that's amazing. We need everyone involved. So for the last couple of minutes, I gave you kind of my initial vision from 2022, and now we're in 2024. And so this is how I presented the findings to the Deputy First Minister for what could education, jobs and work look like across Wales by 2035. By 2035, I see a climate literate population who understand the role they play as climate change actors at individual, community and national level. I see a Welsh Government able to make progressive policies, such as the pathways you've just heard, because they are supported by a Welsh population who understands the necessity and urgency of these policies. In 2035, we will have achieved this in a number of ways. Early in 2026, a survey was commissioned to understand teachers' confidence and competence to teach the new sustainability thread that runs through the curriculum for Wales. Targeted support and skeleton resources were made available to teachers by trusted climate change and sustainability experts. Additional training sessions were run, and Eston started assessing how sustainability flowed through the areas of learning experience. New teachers learnt about climate change and sustainability through newly developed modules in their initial teacher education programmes at university level. As this enthusiasm spread, eco-councils in schools grew, and teacher and pupil representatives attended termly climate action groups for their local authorities. Following the successful model from Carmarthenshire County Council, learners and teachers were able to engage with their local councils to share best practice and tackle multi-level issues such as smart metering, canteen meals, and the addition of solar panels to school roofs. As classroom conversations spilled over into homes, awareness of climate change and the opportunities of sustainable living grew among the adult population. Following the planned phase down of the furnaces at Tata Steel, Port Talbot was chosen as the pilot area for a new scheme. The National Green Scheme was launched in 2025 to provide an income and free training for all those in Port Talbot who wanted to reskill themselves for employment in lower carbon jobs. The scheme was attractive to the people of Port Talbot as they didn't have to worry about providing for themselves and their families whilst retraining. Local green businesses were ready, and Port Talbot became a hub of expertise in solar panel and heat pump installation, insulation, agroforestry, bike repair, to name but a few. Qualifications Wales worked with further education providers to approve new courses in Wales to bring them into alignment with offerings in England, and taking inspiration from the West Midlands Combined Authority Employment and Skills Strategy. As climate change awareness and climate-related employment started to grow across Wales, representatives from the universities worked together to develop a compulsory module for all undergraduate and new postgraduate students. This meant that more learners graduated ready for a changing climate and to be part of the climate mitigation workforce. The public sector and businesses in Wales took note of the changing landscape and listened to the conversations of parents whose children suddenly knew more than they did, and started providing opportunities for employees to attend carbon literacy and climate fresh training. Sustainability champions within workplaces created opportunities for employees to be involved in decarbonisation plans, and through citizens' assembly type processes, more ambitious plans were made than could ever have been conceived before. As people became aware of decarbonisation and nature positive actions they could take, and heard of the effects of the Port Talbot National Green Skilling Wage pilot, they became more supportive of large government expenditure. The National Green Skilling Wage was rolled out nationally by 2030 to widespread support, an uptake moving Wales's economy to one largely decarbonised and enabling early achievement of Wales's decarbonisation targets. I believe this is possible. We have all the pathway advice and all the case studies and technical documents to back it up. Now support us to bring about a transformative Wales that we'll be even more proud of to live in. So we will hopefully see implementation of some of the pathways before the Senate dissolves for elections. And we are hoping that they will inform political parties' manifestos for Senate elections in 2025. And we're also hoping that the UK government takes note of the pathway recommendations because they're applicable across the UK. And I just wanted to finish with a quote from Stan, which I really liked. Change can happen by crisis or choice. If you take anything from our work, know that there is always an alternative. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for that. I don't want to come back to reality, Jennifer. Thank you so much for that. So we've got 5 minutes for questions. Sarah or Kat, you can ask questions unlike people watching the recording.
So we knock the recording off?
We normally include questions
okay.
As part, yeah.
So just a comment, Jennifer, thank you for, I mean, I know we spoke to your group with our jobs and skills report, and that you cited it quite a lot in that in your report as well. And one of the things that, and quite a lot of the recommendations were echoed by our qualities group, I think, that were picked up and discussed in the report, which is really lovely to see. It's lovely to see that it gathering strength. One of the things that we were really keen to see was there were a number of recommendations from our equalities groups. And one was a real pushback against only thinking of current jobs in the net zero sector, the current sectors. There was a real kind of sense from the equalities group that they service the same old. And it's easy to see in Wales how that comes back in, you know, the kind of focus on Port Talbot as an industry as opposed to a community, which or the focus on Port Talbot as an industry rather than a region, and the neglect of those workers who aren't in Port Talbot, who can't get work, for example, and then that extends wider. So I was just wondering what the nature of those discussions that were had in the group about, because it's quite difficult to envision jobs for those who aren't employment as opposed to those who are already in employment and need their jobs upskilling. And I'm just wondering if there was a flavour of that. I mean, our equalities groups were quite clear and our report was quite clear about some of the ways to deal with that. But I imagine that in a group with slightly different mission, that was a much more, well, I just wonder if there was any kind of discussion or debate, or it was just easy to slip into the kind of normative, that's who we think the new workforce will be, if that makes sense.
So I try not to be normative, but I'm also flawed. But I think when I was thinking about it, because I'm autistic, and then I think about people who are kind of locked out of the education system. But if they were able to be themselves, then they would be able to come into, you know, they would be able to get skills and then come into employment. So I think, I hope I was also thinking about people who aren't currently employed, and certainly, you know, that's where some of the ideas for the National Green Skilling Wage came from, because yes, there's you need
that
to
came
be
through in our report. We had the green skilling wage. I think we raised that with you guys. Now that's really interesting, just to see that education was a focus. It won't take that much time. The education was a focus, whereas the skills focus in Wales is quite a challenging area, the transformation of that. So yeah, no, I kind of see where that challenge lay with the group, was looking at the existing or new higher education strategy rather than Wales. So that's really great. And I agree with you. We need a kind of a national, you know, as our report said, we really need a kind of a national green skill, Welsh government owned organization, but also kind of wider skills. So yeah, I mean, I think we're absolutely on the same page. And so, you know, our qualities group probably push down a bit more into those kind of things at times, but also you were able to say stuff and reiterate stuff that we weren't able to say. So that's fantastic to see. There's a real sense of what is needed in Wales from that perspective anyway.
Thank you.
May I also ask a question? That's great, thank you. So I was just thinking, and this is something I always feel like, you know, keep like kind of coming back to, and I love your approach of like visions, and you know, even like using your own stories and visions for the future. And I think that is so powerful. And I think that is such an important way to get us out of this, to really think creatively and think practically at the same time. One thing I'm wondering in terms of your work and your own visions, because, you know, I mean, it's just a typical like tension between what is practical and doable, but then also the kind of just like devastating impacts that we're going to face. Obviously less so here in Wales specifically, but there will be knock-on effects. There will be like all these huge things happening. Like if we think about the future, I find it hard to not think about, you know, like the degrees of warming and the kind of extreme events that we're going to face. So I guess I was just wondering, when you think then practically, especially working closely with government and stuff, is that something that comes into it at all? Or do you like, how do you deal with that challenge?
Can you turn that question from something that was very long into something that's 2 sentences that I can...
I guess thinking about climate, well, future scenarios and the future impacts of climate change, how does that come into the work specifically for you personally? And, you know, yeah, I guess it's thinking about adaptation as well as net zero. And is that something?
Okay. So I think I suppose you could bring adaptation into climate change education as well. I can't think about the future anymore because it scares the monkeys out of me, and it would be too easy to just stop or become a full-blown Christian evangelist. I actually wonder whether I'd be more good to the world by proclaiming the message of Christ, to be honest, than proclaiming the message of climate change. And if I think about too much about the future, I won't do anything now. And so for me, it's, you know, when it all goes wrong, which I think it will, how, you know, it's looking back and thinking, have I done everything that I could possibly do? I think protesting and getting arrested would be another step forwards. But I've done my best, and I think that's all I can try and do. And it's been really nice to revisit the visions that I had and think, well, if this is what society turns out like, and I've been able to be part of that, that's really cool. But if I haven't, we've tried.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's good. Thank you.
We should let you go, but it's really interesting to hear your perspective. We read all the reports, and it's lovely when East worked with us. When East worked with us, East were really unsure about their role and thinking about climate change. So it's so fantastic to hear that East were really kind of skilled and ready after kind of working with our equalities, with the equalities through the equality mainstreaming process with us, that they were kind of really fired up and ready and felt really confident to give that stuff, because that was kind of for some of the equalities groups, it was really a learning process actually.
Okay, I know they've got a Future Generations champion who I was fortunate enough to work with when she worked in the engineering department, and so we set out some specific questions and then she put them on a Jamboard, and so then people could just contribute to the Jamboard.
Right.
And then she sent copies of that Jamboard to us, and I think that was quite nice, where we kind of facilitated, but from a real distance, so they could just put up, and I loved one of the comments, which was, why is this even a thing? Like, why is it any different for BAME people to go into sustainability than it is for non-BAME people? And I'm like, that's the kind of, I feel like that's when we've hit equality, when people don't feel that there are, I don't know, I'm talking to an equality expert.
Well, I mean, the reality is that when you get into like those jobs, they might promote BAME, like they promote women, but once you get in there, they're not nice workplace. They're not culturally diverse workplaces. They're not necessarily safe workplaces, and they can be, institutionally, they can be pretty damaging workplaces. So there's a lot of reasons why it's not the same, in the sense that actually, even if you have the skills and qualifications and you have access to those jobs, you're still often walking into cultures that and places that.
Yeah.
So
I understand that, but I thought it was nice that they didn't see an entry. At least they didn't see an entry barrier. Because I think, there were other people who put forward that there was a massive entry barrier, and they couldn't picture themselves in sustainability because they didn't know anyone who worked in sustainability, but yeah, it was nice. I mean, in my uneducated opinion, it was nice to see that in person.
That's lots of learning, but yeah, no, we really look forward to hearing more about the kind of developments, and I'm sure and Kat's obviously worked in this space for a while as well, so I'm sure we'll kind of keep up. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to head off to another meeting, but I appreciate meeting you, and really again obviously after being at the panel, and really appreciate listening to you talk about the process. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Geraldine, for listening. Nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone. Bye.
I'll stop the recording now.